to Honest HR Nitrous. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the live stream I do a couple of times weekly where we talk about job search, we talk about careers, but we talk about it from a practical sense, not the theory, but from what we actually see in the real world. Stupidity, rudeness, everything. The whole shebang-a-bang. And this is primarily a Q&A, so if you're seeing my beautiful face this beautiful Monday morning, you should see some kind of chat box in the vicinity of my face, if you know what I'm talking about. So get in the chat box, let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and I will do my best to help you out. I have no agenda, no plan of what to talk about. I'm purely going off your questions. So get in the chat, give me some questions. I will do my best to help you. As always, special shout out goes out to my super thanks donors, my Patreons, my YouTube channel members, snap, and to you, my participants. Thank you for being here. Let's get you hired and let's dispel some of the confusion. Peter is here. Welcome, Peter. You win the award for the first person in the chat, so congratulations. That should make you feel pretty good about yourself. Peter says, thanks for an amazing channel. Well, thank you, Peter. That's I do give points for being ingratiating, so that's awesome. But I'm glad you're liking some of this. Peter says, what's the biggest reason why it is so hard to find a job in IT now? We'll get into that in a second. There was something else I forgot to do. Oh, yeah. It was to say the name of this episode. So this episode is called, Is It You or the System? Why You're Not Getting Hired. Live Q&A. This is episode number 66. So we've done 66 of these. Okay, let's talk about IT. Now listen, do I have all the answers about every industry? No, of course not. But what I can tell you is this, is that most industries, including IT, are cyclical. And on top of the whole cyclical thing, they're also, like everything is, they're prone to trends and they're prone to sort of one-way movements. And that's what's going on right now. Now, here's the thing, okay? If you were in IT and you're trying to get a job right now and they're not posting a lot of jobs, okay? Here's the thing. Computers are damn important, okay? And a lot of our world is highly dependent on them, okay? Now, this applies to every industry, but in particular to IT, they are always looking for people. Sometimes they're looking for more, sometimes they're looking for less, but they're always looking for people, okay? And the reality is that there's always an attrition and there's always natural movement, so they're always going to be filling those roles, okay? So hiring is down in IT at the moment, but they've still got positions there. Now, a lot of these positions, especially the good ones, I always talk about it because I always need to talk about it because it's the answer to a lot of things. Okay, is they're always hiring on the hidden job market. Now, the thing about IT is that, as far as I know, there isn't another industry. The exception might be possibly air traffic controllers that collectively, as a group, have less social skills than the people in IT. And I'm not knocking it. I owned a company in IT 25 years ago. Okay? And I've been out of the game for a very long time. But, that's the thing about all the IT people that I always encounter. They're predominantly introverts and they're predominantly technical people. And as such, they're not really tuned into things like networking. And as a result, the people in IT who can really clean up, and they always have. And just like, the big hiring booms are over because of the post-AI thing. I don't know what that's called, but that's basically what's going on right now. They hired a ton of people, and there was a big buzz around AI a few years ago. And now we're coming to the end of it. And also there's a bunch of other things happening right now in the political arena and other things going on that's also contributing to it. So that's coming to an end, or it has come to an end, basically. Now, whether that'll bounce back immediately or it'll be a little while before it does, who can say? I certainly don't have a crystal ball, but I don't really care. If you're in IT, you can get a job. The real enemy is your competition, really. I mean, I hate to say it, but, that's the thing. So people are getting hired. If no one's hiring you, I would say it's because you're going about it the wrong way. I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean that there's ways to get hired, but you just need to clue in about it, okay? So hidden job market, just remember that. Hidden job market and networking, especially when times are tough, especially during an economic recession. That's the name of the game, okay? So that's what I'll say about it. The other thing is that in IT, there's other factors too, like different areas. Some areas are worse than others, right? Now, the two big, at least back when I was in the game, the big divide, the two halves of it were developers and systems admin, right? So sometimes those would sometimes be more or less independent. They'd go down, they go down together, they go up together, but they'd also do this, right? You know, there's all kinds of things going on. There's always a need for the people on the systems admin side. It's a lot, technically speaking, it's a lot more inelastic, okay? It's less elastic. It's more inelastic, okay? You're always going to need people on that side. Businesses have business systems that need to be up and running all the time. You know, they can scale back on maintenance and upgrades and things, but you're always going to need people to be in those roles. So they're hiring. It just a lot of that stuff is going into the hidden job market, and the stuff that was visible in the posted job market, a lot of that's kind of going away right at the moment. Okay, so tune into that. I'm sure we're going to be talking about that more over the course of this live stream. But Peter, you're not alone, and you know, there's a lot of people I see like saying, okay, I'm going to get out of IT because it's bad. Well, you know, that would be a real shame because it's definitely a big booming industry, but the problem is it's rather volatile. It has boom bust cycles, and we're sort of we're heading into a bust cycle right now for that, as far as I can tell. If you, at the worst comes to worst, you might have to do something else for a little while, but don't get out of IT. At least that's my gut feeling. Should you just take my advice and go with it? No. Corroborate it, investigate it. But my gut feeling is you do not want to get out of IT. It's still going to be a growth area. Nick says, thanks for your content. Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you for being here. RC says, people are hiring exact match right now, unless it is from referral and they trust you can do something you never did, but your qualifications prove you can do it. Is this the trend? I'm also from IT. Listen. How can I put this? This stuff, what you just described, that's always the way it is. Okay? That's not like a thing that's just happening now, or they're just going back to that or something. That's always how it is. Okay? Now, I've talked about it till I've been blue in the face on this channel about how you can do exactly what you're talking about, the whole referral thing. Okay? You don't need to know 1 million people for that to work for you. You can arrive in a city, okay? You can move to a city. You know nobody there, okay? And you can reach out to employers. And within just a couple of weeks, you can get these people referring you for jobs, okay? It's just that simple, okay? The idea is that you reach out to them. In my experience, very rarely, unless you're like a kingpin in your industry or something, you know, if you're looking for a job, which is people sort of like on the bottom, if you're looking for a job, then, you know, knowing 1 million people usually doesn't pay off as much as you would think, because what are the odds that one of those people that you know, maybe you know 200 people, okay? Hypothetically, let's say, what are the odds that if they all worked in 200 different organizations, what are the odds that they would know of a job opening right now that's opening up in their group right now? It's pretty slim. You know, it's like 1-2% chance, if that, right? So that's like a handful of opportunities. Okay? You know, what's usually the way you do it is you reach out to hundreds of people at a time in the same way that you apply to hundreds of jobs at a time. Okay? And even if it's like a 1% chance or a 0.5% chance, that's when you still get bites, right? Get leads. Okay, so learn about this stuff. I talk about this stuff in my course. I talk about this stuff every live stream I do. Okay, learn about this. Referrals are always there. They're always hiring people from referrals. Referrals are always preferable. than hiring a total stranger from a job posting or a total stranger from any other channel, through any other means. Okay? Referrals are where it's at. How do you get a referral? If you don't know anyone, you reach out to the individual. Okay? Learn how to do that. Not only will you be able to get hired, but you'll be able to unearth the good jobs at this time, okay? Or at any time. Because those are always done in the hidden job market. They don't have a problem finding people for those jobs. They're highly desirable, highly competitive, right? So learn to tap that. That's where they are. That's where they always have been. That's where they always probably will be. Sarah Bell says, do you have videos about LinkedIn connections and what to say to reach out to people who have the ideal job and asking for tips and advice? Okay, let me read that again. Do you have videos about LinkedIn connections and what to say to reach out to people who have your ideal job and asking for tips? Why would you reach out to someone who's in your ideal job? Do they have the power to give you that job? No, they're in the job. Right? You reach out to people that are above them, that have the power to hire you into that job, if that's what you're going for, right? You know, this is the thing. In order to reach out to people, okay, there's this misconception upon young people and people that have never done this, that you can only reach out to people at the bottom or people that are at your level. Okay, now that's incorrect on both counts. People at the bottom can't help you. Like, what power do they have? You reach out to the secretary. Like, what can they do? Nothing. Now, some people think, okay, well, I reach out to the secretary because maybe they have the power to influence the boss who can do something for me. It's like, no. The secretary can't do anything for you. How often have you put your reputation on the line with your boss on behalf of a stranger? Answer me that. Have you ever done that? Okay. The other thing is, you contact people at your level because people feel nervous contacting people above your level. Well, if you're at the worker level, you're not hiring and firing. You're not in charge of, you don't have responsibility from like a business operation or anything like that. You don't have the power to decide, okay, I need to add another employee to my group. Okay, get our HR on the phone. We need another person, right? Unless you're at that level, what good is it going to do? We're like reaching out to someone at your level. You have to go to people above you, the ones that have the power to hire you, right? Okay. Incidentally, all of this whole shebang, this whole world, how it all works is in that course. This one right here, the Get Hired course, okay? If you want that. Now, I do have some free videos on my YouTube channel. If you go to, you were asking about, do you have any videos about LinkedIn connections? If you go to my YouTube channel, the homepage for my YouTube channel, The Company's Expert, and if you look at it, I've got several playlists, right? Now, one of those playlists is called How to Tap the Hidden Job Market, and it gives you some stuff, okay? There's like a series of 7 videos or something. I did them several years ago, so they look kind of ratty and old, but I talk about that there in that playlist. So that's where I put those if you want to find those. Or you could just do a search. The Company's Expert, and then whatever it is you're looking for, LinkedIn, that kind of stuff, right? So if you use that, those are there. But really, like, the whole shebang is in that course, okay? Right there. Mike G says, do you have any advice to pass for an interview with a hiring manager? Should I expect to see star-based questionnaires, or is that only for an interview with HR? That's... Like, look, first of all, it takes all kinds, okay? So, like, you're going to see all kinds of things going on. But generally speaking, the star questions and stuff like that, that's more for recruiters than it is for hiring managers. Hiring managers are just like regular Joes. They don't work in HR. It's the name given to a manager who has decided they need another employee in their group, right? So, for example... there's a company, right? And they have different departments. They got the marketing department or sales department, operations, supply chain, like whatever, like warehousing. They might have an R&D department, okay, research and development. Now, the head of the R&D department, if they decide we need to hire another scientist or another engineer or whatever to work in this department, and I'm responsible for this department, right? So they get HR on the phone. They say, okay, we need you to post a job. It's for this department. I'll give you the details, right? Okay, so that person, the head of the HR department, they now become the hiring manager, right? That's the idea. So if you applied for that job, you would go down to a job interview to work in the R&D department of this company. And chances are you'd go to the job interview, you'd be in there with the recruiter who does work in the HR department. Their background is like employment standards, labor laws, recruitment and selection practices, things like this, right? Okay. And the other person in the job interview would be the hiring manager, the person in charge of the R&D department. Now, they don't know much about labor laws, but their background would be science and technology and research, like, product development and all that kind of thing. So they're not an HR employee. They're just like the Joe manager, And so when you go down there, the person that's probably going to be asking you all the psychological type questions, like, what's your motivation, and, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and like all this kind of stuff, tell me about a time you had to resolve conflict, that's probably going to be a recruiter, because those are kind of standard job interview type questions. The hiring manager, they don't come from the world of job search. They come from the world of science and technology and research. So they're probably going to be asking you more of the technical questions, details about like how you do your research and what research you've done, and that kind of thing, right? That's usually how this goes. Okay, there's exceptions, but that's the general idea. So if you're talking to a hiring manager, okay, they'll probably want to talk shop with you. Okay. If it's a smaller company, more informal, they'll probably talk shop. They'll talk about research and development and how you do it and what you've done and what's your methods that you use and what's your thoughts on like how it should be done, that kind of thing, right? They'll ask you about your experiences and your accomplishments within research and development, right? That kind of stuff. So that's usually what they care about. And then they may care about high level stuff like, why do you like research and development? Why are you in it? What's your career plan? Or do you intend to stay in it? Things like this, right? The recruiter, they're the ones going to ask you things like, tell me about yourself and what are your salary expectations? Stuff like that. Okay. So the thing about the hiring manager is that if you get the job, you're going to be working with them every day. They're going to be your boss, probably. So it's very important they like you and they get along with you. So try and be warm and personable and approachable and all that kind of stuff. And if you can, as much as possible, try and have a rapport with them. It's much more important that you have a rapport with them than you do with the recruiter, okay? The recruiter is there to advise the hiring manager and say, like, in my opinion, I think candidate 2 and not candidate 6 were really good, right? But once you get hired and maybe the onboarding is over, you never see those recruiters again. They leave. They're not going to be working with you. The hiring manager is going to be with you for the long haul. So, number one, try and get the hiring manager to like you. Be friendly, be personable, and try and relate to them. Speak to, the type of things that they want to know, and in particular. Hopefully that makes sense. Great question, though. Ziggy101 says, how do you know you did well in the first round interview? 99.9% of the time you don't. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, just do the best you can, and then that's all you can do. Now, the only sort of thing you have to go on, okay, is if you're a more emotionally intelligent person, you can like read body language and pick up on things like this, especially if you're dealing with interviewers and things that are less emotionally intelligent. They're bad at hiding that stuff, like me. I was never the best touchy-feely type person, emotionally intelligent type person. That wasn't my strength. You have to learn the basics, but it's like that was never what I did. That wasn't my core competency. The only thing you have to really to go on is towards the end of the interview, when they've probably decided how they feel about you by that point. Usually they do it early on, but they have the whole interview to decide. at the end, how enthusiastic are they about answering your questions, right? Usually they say at the end, do you have any questions for us? Right? Now, if you ask them a couple of questions and then they answer you like in a very kind of short, curt manner, they don't seem interested, they seem kind of bored, they want to end the interview as soon as possible. All those are obvious indicators that they're not super into you. On the other hand, if you ask, some questions at the end of the interview and they give you full and complete information, they extend the interview, they're really enthusiastic about talking to you still, like that bodes well, right? So does that tell you whether you did well or not? No, but it's somewhat of an indicator. It can tell you something, right? And that's about all you can do, in my opinion. As far as I'm aware, that's really the only thing you can do to get any kind of real feedback. Of course you can ask, and of course they can tell you stuff, but this is a situation where people are going to be lying, So I wouldn't trust anything they say, even when prompted. They're going to say something nice no matter what, usually, or they're going to be a jackass no matter what, So that's about the best thing you can do. Peter says, ChatGPT has been great for generating sample intro messages for recruiters for me. Okay, good. That's good to know, Peter. Mighty Mojo says, hi, Bill. I've been following your channel over a year, and you never get tired telling us about the hidden market. Yeah, I never get tired because, that's what hiring is, I mean, the other thing is that I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. And when you consider it's the most widespread method people get hired, it's like I've got a lot of work to do on my channel if most other people are not really mentioning it, I mean, how many times have I said, I feel like I'm a broken record. I say, don't take my word for any of this if you've never heard about it before, or you don't believe me when you hear about this thing, the hidden job market, and how you can get it through networking and how anybody can do networking, including technical, introverted IT people, right? And I know something or two about that. You can use networking. You can use it the way that works for you. If you're an introvert, you don't have to schmooze with anybody. You don't have to, sort of go to events or any of that stuff. Introverts hate that kind of thing, and they're not super good at it too. So, you know what I mean? Because they don't do it and they don't like it. But hey, if you can get on social networking, if you know how to use the internet, you can line up all kinds of meetings with people. And then just like you're capable of going to a job interview, right? You can go to these types of meetings. They are better than job interviews. They are more pleasant than job interviews because you're being invited in by the person. It's not like you're trying to force your way in anything. They're inviting you in. This is the beautiful thing. If you know how to do this right, this is what you can do. This is what most people do. That's how you get jobs. People that are in the second half of their careers are usually much more tuned into this than people in the first half of their careers. Wouldn't it be great if we could teach young people about this? So that's why I talk about it, because people usually that come to me, they've never heard of it. That's why they're having problems, That's a part of it. That's not the entire reason, but that's part of it. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of ended up being my role in a way because no one else is talking about this thing. At least not on YouTube, because they're all like former recruiters or current recruiters, No offense to them. I have no problem with them. Recruiting is a function like any other business function. It serves its purpose, and you get some people that are pretty damn useless at it. And you get people that are pretty damn amazing at it. It's like anything else. But the hidden job market, it bypasses a lot of that, right? It's how executives get hired. It's just that you're applying the same techniques, even though you might not be an executive. You might be a worker, and you're doing the same technique, and it can work for you the same way it works for them, And that happens every day. Anyway, Mighty Mojo says, I've been recently hired and need to say that there's no way in getting hired by connecting to a manager who gets you hired in major organizations. It's all about endless interviews and grinding. Okay, well, whatever. If that's your experience, sure. But for most other people, that's not the case. Sarah Bell says, okay, thank you. Just not having success with LinkedIn connections so far. I'll check out that playlist. Yeah. Mohammed says, can I use a CV and resume interchangeably? Well, technically, a resume is a document that has your work experience on it. And technically, a CV, curriculum vitae, is a document that has your academic publications on it, right? So they're two different things. I know that in certain parts of the world, they use the term CV for resume. I mean, it's semantics, potato. But depending where you are in the world, I mean, people use those terms interchangeably, or they prefer one or the other, or they use them to refer to the things I just mentioned. So there's no universal standard for it. Green Virus says, I've been widening my connections and reaching out to network and just chat. I've been trying to use the Hinge job market to my advantage to find positions. Sadly, nothing comes of it. Okay. Yeah, well, it's hard to learn about it. There's a lot of principles involved, you know. That's why traditionally the only people that, you know, that would do this exclusively are executives. All executive jobs you get them through the hidden job market, right? Why? Why is that? You wonder? It's because you don't hire a damn stranger to put in charge of your massive, you know, organization that generates the income and the retirement for many people and keeps many other people employed. You know, you don't put a stranger in charge of that. You need to know who you're getting, and you need to know they're good. This isn't like hiring a low-level person where you can afford to take a chance on them to a degree. You can maybe have a probationary period because you really don't know who you're getting because you hired a stranger, right? You can't do that when it's like really important. When it's a situation where if you get the wrong person, you might as well end the company sometimes, right? Because the damage they can do, they can not only drive away all your talented employees, not only destroy your reputation amongst your customers, you know, in your market, not only run your business right into the ground so you're no longer profitable, right? Not only can they behave so irresponsibly with their organization that, you know, you've got like multiple lawsuits on your hands. You know what I mean? Like if you put the wrong person in there, it's just bad with a capital B. You know, that's why you can't afford to take a chance on anyone. You need to know who you're getting exactly. You need to know exactly who this person is. You know, just reading their resume and just hoping that it's true. You know, that's not how it works, right? So that's why they go about hiring. They don't use the posted job market. If you see a CEO job in there, it's usually because, you know, they have to. It's for political reasons, for visibility and PR reasons. They want to make it look like they're considering everybody when they're not. You know, or it's in like a little bubble like government. You know, like they have very specific rules. They have to do things a certain way, you know, because they're funded, right? They're not their own entity. So, you know, that's why this exists, right? So it's also the way that people contact companies. If you want to do a strategic partnership with another company, you want to reach out to, you know, some manufacturing company or some supplier in this geographic region. It's like you don't know any of them. You have to make contact and open a dialogue with them. How do you do it? You use exactly the same technique. Okay, was I here? So Green Virus. I've been reaching out, posting, and doing my best to find new leads for a new role. Nothing comes of it. What would you suggest? Okay, so for a job search campaign, this is what I recommend. Okay, you're not just going to look in one place. You're going to look in multiple places. Okay, so first of all, I don't care who you are. You should be looking at the posted job market in some capacity. Okay, what you can do. I mean, the technology changes every few years, but what you can do is you can set it up so that, if you're looking in a certain location, like a geographic region for a job, you can set it up so the alerts come to you, whether you're using like Twitter X or you're using like Google, was it Google Jobs or like one of those things. You can set it up so that they're coming to you like in real time. Okay, you've got filters and searches and that sends you the results. Okay, so I would do that. And then if something like really promising comes up, you have multiple options. You can do the exact thing that they're recommending, what I call the standard process. That's where, they have a process. They say, if you want to apply, you apply here. So you go to their website or you send an email or whatever it is that they tell you to do. You can do that, but you can also go above and beyond. The next step up, which is still pretty basic, is to try and contact the recruiter and say, like, listen, I have this. Does it make sense for me to apply for this, or something like that? See if you could open some kind of dialogue with the recruiter. There might be some value in that, or you can, and you may not always be able to do this, especially for a big company, but for some things, you can find out who is the hiring manager for that role and then contact them, right? And say, like, listen, I've just got a question. I understand that you're hiring, what's the nature of that role? Is that like a new position or is that a replacement for someone that's retiring, And then while you have them on the phone or you have their attention, you ask them, like, what are you looking for? Like, what, are you looking for someone that's more from this background or that background? What's the key thing? And stuff like that. Sometimes they'll talk to you and they'll tell you that, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes they won't. It really depends on the company, but something you can try. So that's what I would do in the posted job market. Then everything I would do other than that would be on the hidden job market. And there's multiple things you can do there. Okay. The big thing, of course, would be direct outreach, right? And I've given some examples of that. I would do direct outreach. I would do informational interviews. And then there's a lot of other things. I did videos a long time ago, like talking about the different ways of getting hired. Everything from like applying in person to what I call growth opportunities. I don't call it that. I've heard that term, but I don't think it's a standard term. That's where you find out what businesses are coming to town, right? Somebody mentioned, was it the first person that in the chat they mentioned, like, was it EDS? No, that was this morning. Somebody mentioned like economic development department of the local government. So they know exactly what businesses are coming to town, right? And, if you can find out from them, what you can do is you can proactively contact those businesses and say, like, hey, I understand you're setting up shop here. If you ever need like a local guide, someone who would love to work for you, has lots of skills and can help show you the town, right here, that kind of thing. And a lot of times they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we don't have a person in your town yet. It would be nice to have somebody that is familiar with the place, who can help us with hiring and all this kind of stuff, so, you could be that person. You could be one of the first people hired for their new location. There's all kinds of other methods there. So I would do all of those to a degree. Growth opportunities is one of the more exotic ones. So I wouldn't do that first, but there's a lot of things there. Don't just look in one place. Look in the posted market and then look in the hidden market too. Okay. Okay. Where did I leave off here? Okay. Nick says, thank you for your content. I might be starting a corporate role on Monday after 7 years freelancing. Could you give me some survival tips? I'd like to grab a few paychecks and move on. Survival tips? Well, listen, if you're starting at a new place, start off on the right foot, go in there, be super friendly, be accommodating. I mean, I don't know what type of job you have. If you have a blue collar job, and I've had some experience with this in the first part of my career where I was like supervising tradespeople and stuff, it's like, a survival guide. One thing I learned about like working in industries like the railroad and stuff, at the sort of where the rubber meets the road is, like, how can I put this? People still do initiation and stuff like this, and they might like almost like play practical jokes on you and things like this. You've got to just have the right attitude about it if that's the environment into which you're going. You can't get like highly offended and, all this kind of stuff. Just try and roll with it. And a lot of times they'll kind of do that to the new person just to kind of feel them out. And then a very short time later, they kind of, you become included and all that kind of stuff. So just go in there with a smile, go in there trying to get along with everyone. Don't be aloof. You know what I mean? Even if it's like not the most friendly place, like it's kind of people are disgruntled or something, still go in there and try and be like, the nice person that, is always happy to help and is always friendly to everyone. And, even if they're stressed, even if you're really not having a good day, you still put on a bright smile for people and, are very polite to people and say nice things about people. If someone does something nice for you or just like a little thing, call them on it. Say like, listen, I really appreciate you doing that thing for me. That's really awesome. Don't ever stop doing that because I think that's awesome. Not a lot of people do that today, but you do it. So I think that's wonderful. Just little things like this. And then people warm to you. And then you have an easier time there. When the people are good to you, it's a good job. When the people, are jackasses to you and they don't get along with you, then it doesn't matter what you do, it's going to suck, Hopefully that helps. I mean, that's that. I don't know what situation you're in, but hopefully that's useful. JS says, I got an interview in a few days using your method. I did calls a couple of weeks ago with HR, so I passed. Any tips on preparing for the second interview with the hiring manager? The second interview, they're going to want to go deeper, right? So there's kind of two types of second interview. There's the second interview with like different people, where it's like a replay of the first interview, just with different people. And then there's the second interview with the same people, right? In which case they're going to go deeper, right? So the first time they might have just gotten the broad strokes of your background and things like this. They're probably going to want to go deeper now, okay? So they're going to ask you for more details. They're going to ask you for like why you did a certain thing and then not another thing, things like that. Nothing to worry about. Just do your preparation kind of the way you did the first time. It's just that they might get deeper into it this time. Okay. Usually for a second interview, in my experience, they would add another person. Like maybe they'll add like a new senior manager or something, and if that's the case, they're looking at high level stuff. They're looking at like your motivation, where like what basic plans you have for your career or your ambition, stuff like that. Try to tailor that stuff to as much as you can, as much as Like the thing is, if they were just going to ask you your ambition and what you had to do was simply just be honest, that's not hard. You don't really have to rehearse that, right? But what's tricky about it is that if you say something that's totally incompatible with what they do at that organization, so when you say, this is my ambition, I want to get into this and I want to spend my time doing that, and they're thinking like, oh, that's really not us. We don't really do that, So in a sense, you kind of failed the question. What I'm saying is that when you rehearse stuff, you're going to rehearse giving the right answer, right? If you're going down to a job interview, try and get it. So, have an idea of the company, do your research on the company, make sure you understand exactly what they do, the structure of it. Some people will tell you to like learn all the corporate values and all that. Personally, I think that's a waste of time, but because I feel that for most companies, that stuff, the stuff that's publicly facing, it's just a PR tool. It's not really what they think or what they actually do. It's just a bunch of nice sounding corporate PR stuff. But learn what the business does. Look at the size of the operation, where the operation is located, how they're structured, that kind of stuff. So when you talk about things like your ambition, it makes sense. Don't say you want to work somewhere else, even in another department, just say I'd like to do this, basically, but they'll want to go deeper in the second interview. That's as simple as that. And then the only other thing you got to make sure of, and you're doing a second interview, is that your answers are consistent consistent with what you said in the first interview. So if they ask you a question and you really didn't know the answer and you kind of made something up, you got to beware, because if they ask you that type of question again, like they're referring to what you had previously told them, only this time you say something completely different, that's going to look bad, right? So just consistency is important too. Sometimes they're not really paying attention to that stuff. They can't even remember, but other times they are. So just beware of that. But you should do fine. Just go in there, be the most likable person, be agreeable, don't take offense over like little things, just be super friendly and accommodating. And that's how you get around hiring managers. They want to hire the most likable person, the one that clicks with them. That's what they're looking for. Amaze says, isn't it important to conduct an honest self-assessment to understand why we may have been passed over for opportunities? An executive recently reminded me that soft skills like kindness matter too. Well, yes and no. I mean, listen, like for example, I'm on YouTube. So I get on YouTube. The first comment I read is that somebody hates my guts. The second comment I read is that I'm fat. You know what I mean? It's like, that just comes with the game. When, like, I don't know, 10,000 people see your stuff every day, you know, people are going to like say nasty things, you know, no matter what you do. You could have like, you know, I could have been the most like physically appealing, nicest person ever, that my entire video was just to wish them best of luck and say they're awesome. And I would still get hate mail back. You know what I'm saying? So would I then do, like as you say here, would I then do an honest self-assessment to understand why that person didn't like me? No, I wouldn't, because that's just the thing that happens. You put yourself out in the world, and some people will like you, some people will hate you, and some people will be indifferent to you. You know, somewhere in the middle. You know, that's just how it goes. You could be the most amazing employee the world has ever seen, and the nicest person that the world has ever seen, and you're still going to get a lot of rejection, and you're going to get people in the interview telling you that you're not qualified and you're not a good employee and they don't want you. You know? Now, does the fault lie with you? No, it doesn't. It's these people are out to lunch. You know? I've worked with people that hired me and then it didn't work out and they ended up in jail. You know what I mean? It's like, some of these people are bad, you know? So if they didn't like you, is that a reflection on you? Absolutely not. The other thing is that some of them are looking for people to exploit, and they passed you over. They thought, we won't be able to exploit this person, right? But you still got rejected, right? Now, are you going to do some hand-wringing about that and go, oh my God, I must be a bad person? No. It's actually a good thing that they passed you over. It was a lucky escape, you know? So don't be too hard on yourself, okay? You're always going to encounter people where it just doesn't work out, and that's fine. But you're also going to encounter people where it doesn't work out, but then they're offensive enough to tell you that straight to your face in a very blunt way. And, you know, you feel this tall getting that kind of feedback, right? But it's not a reflection on you. It's the problem. It's a them problem, right? Okay. So now, if every single thing you did, it was kind of suspicious in how it always immediately fails without any kind of success story or any kind of encouragement. If that's what you're encountering, maybe there is something that you're doing that, you know, that you can tweak, that, you know, it's a problem, it's holding you back, that you could maybe tweak and then you fix it and then you get nothing but good results, right? Now, to know about that, you have to get someone else's opinion. It's impossible, I would say, for most of us to be objective about ourselves, okay? That's fine. That's just human nature. To other people, it's so obvious, you know, what our problem is, but we can't see it, right? Now, that's where you've got a couple of options. The simplest, cheapest option is to ask friends and family. You know, like you do the mock interviews, like I always suggest, to rehearse, to practice your interviewing skills and get good at it and develop confidence, right? One fringe benefit of doing that is that you can then ask the other person, So how am I doing? Is there any way do you think I could improve? Like, is there any change I could make? And they might say, well, listen, I kind of hate to say it, and I feel a little bit nervous saying this, but when you talk, you come across as like very, very intense. You might want to just relax a little and not sort of be as, in your face and as intense as you're doing. I think it would go better for you, But then the question arises, do you trust your friends and family members? Would you go on their word instead of your own? Some people, yes, some people, no. Now, the next step is to go and get an interview with a career coach. You can do this on YouTube. I mean, I do a collaboration every 2 weeks with another YouTuber here on this channel. Her name is Abby. She is a former recruiter. I think she's a current recruiter, actually. But she offers all that, career coach type service. She was telling me, this is what she says. She's saying that a lot of people, they just get one session and they do this. They sort of like, let's do a mock interview and I'm going to give you my opinion, like my feedback of how I think you're doing and what you could maybe tweak a little to improve, right? This is her talking. This is what she does. And she's saying, well, it just takes one session. Like, you're not breaking the bank and it's not taking a lot of time just to get, a professional recruiter's opinion on how you're doing and give you honest feedback, someone in your court, right? So that's another possibility if you want to go down that route, right? There's a couple options there. But if you get rejected or you get somebody that doesn't click with you, is that like a reflection on you? Absolutely not. That's par for the course. That comes with the territory when you're doing this, when you're putting yourself out there. Okay? So that's what I'd say about that. And of course, soft skills matter. Interviews are about soft skills. I just did a video on that a week ago or less. That's what interviews are about. Don't be fooled by the fact that they ask you technical questions, right? It's not really about your technical skills. The application was about your technical skills. This is about who you are as a person. That's why they want to talk to you, right? The technical job interview questions, that just gives them something to talk about, right? But really they're assessing who you are and if they want to work with you. So it's all about your soft skills. And the most likable candidate is usually the one they hire. So learn to be likable. Like me. Just kidding. Mehmet says, what do you think of open applications through homepages of companies? What do I think about them? Well, that's okay. I mean, it's not the best way to get a job, but it is a legitimate way to get a job. It's not the most popular way. The most popular way is some form of networking. What you don't see is you don't see the people that are all going around that process, that are not, like, for example, let's pretend that, in a way, the application process, the hiring process for that company is like a race where you start at the starting line and then you got to run and then you end at the finish line, right? Okay. So in order to get to the finish line, you got to go down this long process of sending in an application, getting an interview, getting a second interview, doing all the background checks and all that kind of stuff, reference checks, whatever. And then they bring you back in, and then there's an offer, and it's a conditional offer, and then you negotiate, and then, if it isn't rescinded, then they hire you, that kind of stuff. That's that whole process, right? Unbeknownst to you, there are people that are just sort of going around the race course, just strolling, and then just coming onto the race course right at the end and going right across the finish line. That's people in the hidden job market. They're talking directly to the hiring manager, just placing a phone call, or meeting them in person, and they're having their own job interview ahead of everyone else. And it's much more informal, and it's much more about, talking shop and just asking questions about the company and stuff like that. And they've gotten in, and a lot of time those people get hired. Sometimes there is no race. They just do it that way. You know what I mean? So you're not seeing that. Posted jobs are like the last method of filling a position that's available. there are at least 3 other methods that are much more desirable, that are easier, that are quicker, and they come first. And only if they can't find anyone in those 3 methods do they resort to the 4th method, which is posting the job. And then they hand you over to recruiters, and recruiters treat you a lot worse than a hiring manager would. So that's what I'd say. So yeah, you could do it. It's good if you're like just starting out. Like that's usually what people do when they're just starting out. They go through the front door. Once you've had 1 or 2 or 3 career jobs, then you go around this process. Nick says it helps. Good. It was real is here, says. It was real, says hired students. Big challenge is how to get an interview. Well, once again, like, that's another catch-22. That whole thing where like you need experience to get a job and you can't get a job if you have no experience, right? That's like a catch-22. You break that by going and talking to the hiring manager, right? That's how you break that cycle. See, the thing is, when you go and talk to the hiring manager, when you go around this system, right? A couple of things change. Number one, you're not talking about what you do. You see, in a job interview, you're talking about like what you have and why you're good. You're not demonstrating anything. You're just talking about, oh, I've got all this experience, I've got all these skills, and I'm, really likable person, and I've got great communication skills, right? You're just talking about what you have. When you go around things and you talk to the hiring manager just on your own initiative, now all of a sudden you're demonstrating. This is a free sample of what I'm like. First of all, nobody told me to come here. I didn't have to come here, right? I didn't have to reach out to you. I did that voluntarily. Now that alone, before we even go any further, that elevates me above the crowd of applicants. Because how many of those people are doing this? None. I'm the one that's actually enthusiastic enough about working here that I'm going to do this to get this job, right? So already I'm distinguishing myself above all the people who just didn't volunteer for this. I volunteered, right? You got 800 people that applied for this job. How many of them reached out to you beforehand? 1, 2, that's it? Right? Well, those are the 2 that are actually interested in working here, specifically here, right? And then it goes from there. They can get they then get a free sample of your communication skills by you setting up a meeting, right? They see how persuasive you are. They see how professional you are. They see how they agreed to meet you. And that was a testament to your communication skills and your professionalism, right? You understand what's appropriate. You understand how to be persuasive. And there were no red flags. When they checked out, if this was on LinkedIn and they checked out your LinkedIn profile, there was no red flags. If you had sent a message to them, there was no red flags in the message, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that you're demonstrating your abilities. You're not just talking about what the abilities are you have. You're demonstrating them, right? That's what this does. It's a different situation. So I'm encouraging you, learn all you can about this. You can learn it from me. I'm sure the information is out there and on the internet. I'm sure there's other people that will tell you about this. But then go out and try stuff. If you want to get it from me, it's all in that course, my Get Hired course. Okay, so you can do that if you want to learn it with me. But these are like life skills. These are how like managers that are certainly at the executive level, sometimes at the upper middle management level, this is how they all get hired. Okay? Because they know what's appropriate to do. They have great communication skills. They have initiative to reach out to people. This is what opens doors for you. And you could start now and use this method now. I don't care if you're just starting out, and it would still open doors for you. There's no like minimum age and there's no minimum experience level. It just usually people have to see this a few times to realize it's there, right? in my hometown, there's a club called the Manitoba Club. And there's an equivalent club in most big cities, okay? They'll have some version of this. In some cities in the States, they have multiple clubs like this. And all the people that own companies and all the big shots and the high rollers, they're all members of this, right? And the way these clubs work is that you can't buy your way in. There's no membership fee that you have to buy in. You have to be recommended by somebody else. Okay, that's how these things work, right? So, it's not a matter of I've arrived in town and I just join a club. The idea is that, you get it through networking, right? And there's a reason for that, right? People have to stake their reputation to recommend you. And if you were to behave badly or something or abuse the privilege, it reflects on them, right? So that's kind of like what this stuff is like. Now, if you don't know anybody, you can start building this up by reaching out to people. Most people, especially at the bottom, they don't reach out to anyone. They don't even know this is a thing. Or if they try, they go about it the wrong way. And that's understandable. At least they're trying. That's how you learn. But what does it say about the person that's like reaching out? It's saying that they're interested. It's just like volunteering. That's why that's why they say it's good to put on a resume. Because why would volunteering be like a thing that would be good on a resume? Like, is it this thing that shows you have tremendous qualifications? No. What it shows is that you're obviously interested in doing that because you don't really get any pay, right? So the fact that you volunteered for this, that must mean that you actually have a genuine interest in doing that. That's what it means. That's its value, right? When you reach out to people, you're elevating yourself above the crowd because you don't have to do this. Nobody told you to do this. You're not following a procedure. You're demonstrating, like, I'm interested in this and I'm the type of person that can make things happen. I initiate things. I don't wait to be called. I make it happen. And if you go about it in a good way, the person responds favorably, even better. You're demonstrating not only do I care about this organization and working for it or whatever, but I have some real skills that I'm showing off in the process. Right? So if you're a student and you feel that catch-22, I want to get a job, but nobody will hire me because I don't have any experience, and I can't get experience without getting hired, right? You know what I mean? That catch-22, you break that by reaching out to somebody, right? And that shows that, like, okay, I've got the initiative, I've got the interest, the enthusiasm, and my skills are on display. I'm not just talking about that I have skills. I'm showing you I've got skills. You can see them right there. And if you agree to meet with me, you're obviously validating all the skills that I have. Right? And that's what opens a lot of doors. Marek says, I wonder how much disappointment entrepreneurs experience after hiring. All the candidates are like on steroids, wonderful in all aspects during the hiring process. Entrepreneurs, okay. It was real, thanks for... It was real, says, thanks for the info. Is there a way to get in touch with you? Yeah, right here. This is what we're doing now. Mehmet says, I will attend a meeting on board where a bunch of interesting companies will be present with their products and open stands. How can I convince them to assign me as their sales representative in my country? Okay, well, if you really want to do it, first of all, let's pretend for a second that these people have the power to do that. I'm not sure if they do. If they're just a representative of the company manning a booth at a trade show or something, I don't know if they're going to have the pull to be able to hire you and get you into a certain position, right? Or even to recommend you for it within their large organization. The person who actually is the hiring manager may never heard of this person that works manning their own booth at that event, right? They're two different departments possibly, okay? But if you want to make them regard you favorably, you can go down to the booth. You could talk to them. You could ask them about, like, don't tell them all about you. That's not how you get people engaged in a conversation. You ask them questions about them. You say, like, wow, like, look at this. I see. So you guys do hydroelectricity, right? Well, like, how does it work? What's the great thing about hydroelectricity? Like that kind of thing. Just get them to start talking, and they'll say, well, it's a great thing. It does this and it does that. We've got operations here and here. And it's like, oh, that's fantastic. What do you do in that location? And you just egg them on. You learn as much as you can, and then you're super appreciative of everything they tell you. You're pleasant. You're easy to talk to. And you're asking them about stuff that they know about and that they love talking about. Okay? They want to talk about it. Right? So that's a way for them to sort of warm to you, to enjoy speaking with you. And then after a certain amount of time where they're like telling you all this stuff, right? At a certain amount of time after that, they'll probably, feel it's appropriate to like ask you about you. So like, who are you? What brings you down here? What are you looking for? This is a employment trade show. This is like a job fair. What brings you down here? Like, have you thought about like where your career is going to take you and all this? And like, that's where you can say like, well, I'm interested in this. I'm interested in what you said about this thing. I think that's absolutely fascinating. I'd love to be able to get more information about that. Perhaps talk to some of the people in your operation that do that. Would that be possible? That kind of thing, and just go from there. Right? Or you could just use LinkedIn to like find all that directly, right? But if you're looking for someone to invite you in, that's, and you're trying to do it through this job fair or something, that would be probably one way of doing it. So that was Mehmet. Amaze says, would you recommend turning off LinkedIn activities so my activities are not visible? I'm not a big like LinkedIn aficionado anymore. I used to be on there like quite a lot when I used it for like a lot of networking and stuff. I built up my business. I do a lot of repeat business, and I haven't really used it for that kind of thing for several years. So, I mean, I don't even know which ones are activities. Ever since Microsoft bought it, they've been trying to turn it into like the Facebook of business, and they're really succeeding. There's a lot of crap on there. There's a lot of people posting about politics and all kinds of stupidity. So it's really moving away from what it once was, which was like a serious kind of place for business people to connect and stuff like that. That's kind of what it was sort of at one point. So I'm not even sure what activities are. I know they have that little flag that you can turn on that says like, hello, I'm looking for work, in all honesty, I don't recommend you. I don't know if I want to say I don't recommend it across the board, but for a lot of purposes that people are trying to do, I would recommend not putting that on, because there's pros and cons. Like, pros is that, in theory, a recruiter that's looking for talent could maybe contact you and discover you easier, I suppose. But there's negative effects of that too. Like, for example, people know that work gaps are not looked upon favorably by recruiters, right? So the problem is that if you've only been out of work for a little while, if you possibly can, I would just leave your LinkedIn profile alone, and it still looks like you're employed with your last company. If it was like a small amount of time, like if it was say up to 3 months, maybe even 6 months, I just, and if anyone calls you on it, say like, well, I just didn't get around to updating that, but, because it's only recently happened, kind of thing. But, the problem is like now it's clear as day that you're out of work. You know what I mean? And that has certain disadvantages, certainly with recruiters and things. They don't like that. These people have a herd mentality. And the way they think is like, oh, if nobody else is hiring you, then maybe we shouldn't hire you also, because there might be something wrong with you. We don't know. So we're just like managing our risk here by not taking a chance on you. Right? That's how these people think. So it can backfire too. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to about activities, but like, unless you're doing something like very focused and very specific, with recruiters, you're trying to go after recruiters or something, I would strongly think twice about putting on that flag that says I'm open to work. It's counterintuitive. I get it, but it does have negative consequences that hurt you other ways. Emmy says, current job market, qualify for many positions, interview with HR and management, however, receive rejection email a week later. Is anyone experiencing this? I would imagine many people are experiencing that. That's pretty typical experience. You see, getting a job is not about what you're qualified for. Like, you're probably qualified to do many things. It's a lot more than just being qualified for something, right? A lot of younger people kind of have this thing where it's like, oh, I'm qualified for the job, therefore I should have gotten it. It's like, no. First of all, 800 people applied for this job, and you can be sure that there's many more people besides you that are technically qualified for it, right? Okay? At least from the perspective of the employer, right? Okay? Everyone they bring down to a job interview is qualified to do the job on paper. Because it doesn't make any sense to talk to somebody that's not qualified for the job, right? Like, what would be the point? You get along with them great. You think they're wonderful. You'd love to work with them. But it doesn't matter because they're not qualified to do the job. So you can't hire them. Like, what's the point of talking to that person, right? So everyone they bring down to a job interview is qualified. That's not what job interviews are about. Every single person they're talking to is qualified, right? It's about your soft skills. It's about who you are as a person. Do they want to work with you? You could go down to the job interview and you can have like the most amazing resume, all this track record of success and accomplishments and, lots of education, whatever. But you're just insufferable. You go down there and you're like acting all arrogant. You're acting like you're not really into the job. You don't need the job. You're too good for it. You don't really get along with them. You're not going to tolerate their attitude at all to like an offensive degree. You're not going to tolerate, any kind of thing that could remotely be considered some form of mild disrespect. You know what I mean? It's like, they're not going to hire you, not in a million years. It doesn't matter. You could have 15 PhDs and they still wouldn't hire you. You know what I mean? It's not about qualifications. It's about who you are. And then, as you can imagine, more than one person is A, qualified, and B, they'd probably be good to work with. So then it gets really stupid. Then, in order to narrow it down further, the criteria gets even more retarded. Like, I did a video where I keep getting criticized about this on a daily basis, where I said, and this is something that I witnessed, where the hiring manager, I was in the room when they were doing job interviews, the hiring manager did not hire a candidate simply because they liked a certain sports team that the hiring manager did not like. So they're like, nope, that's not going to work. I can't work with them on a daily basis. So they hired somebody else. That was only because the two people they had to choose from, they were both awesome as people, as far as we could tell, and they were both highly qualified. So how do you make a determination? It comes down to like stupid things like that, And this is the stuff that no one will ever give you feedback on, especially in the United States, that very litigious society, because if you admit, oh, I didn't hire you because you like this sports team, it's like, hello, lawsuit, hello, discrimination, hello, bias, but you've got to make a decision. And in the absence of any real criteria, you have to resort to silly things like this. That's what happens every day. It's a numbers game. That's why you shouldn't take rejection, as some kind of statement of your value. It really isn't, for a variety of reasons, including this one. If you were turned down for a job recently and you're kind of doing some soul searching about it, listen, it's okay. You're perfectly employable. You're perfectly fine. The odds is that you could have had that job and it was just a roll of the dice, between candidates. Either that or the thing I said earlier where they were looking for someone to exploit and they didn't pick you maybe because you didn't look like you fell off the turnip truck yesterday. You didn't look gullible, right? In which case, congratulations, you didn't get the job. That was a lucky escape. Those people were going to be a nightmare to you. You know, keep moving. Find people that value you, that respect you. You know, I know that is hard. It's hard to hear, or you don't want to hear that. You want to hear that you're hired. And yes, I agree. But don't worry, you will be hired. It's a really good thing you didn't get hired with those people. Okay? Because unbeknownst to you, behind the scenes, it was a nightmare. Now, like I said earlier, if you still have, issues where you have issues with confidence, in the sense that you think like, God, I highly suspect I'm doing something wrong, but I don't know what that is. Like I said earlier, you have some options. Friends and family members, get their opinion. Like, am I doing something wrong? Is there something I should tweak? Be honest with me. Or if you don't feel comfortable, you don't trust your friends and family, one session with a career coach. There's people on the internet, there's people in real life. Just one session. And they can tell you, they give you some feedback and say like, look, I'm a professional recruiter. This is what I think. I think that, this answer is good, that answer is good, but you need to not say this, you need to not say that. And instead of giving that answer, you need to say this. And stop doing that thing with your hands when you talk, right? You can get that kind of feedback if that's what you really need. If you really suspect something's wrong. But don't do it because you tried one thing and got one rejection. You know what I mean? Do it if you've been rejected for 3 months, 5 months, 8 months in a row. You know what I'm saying? With nothing working out, no matter how many hundreds of things you've tried. Okay, where did I leave off? This thing keeps jumping on me as always. I really need to get better live stream software. Okay, so there's Emmy. It was real says, thanks, Bill. Is there a website you would recommend that's just for students looking to get hired? Job site specifically tailored just people coming into the job market, not LinkedIn. Sorry, I mean I'm sure that exists. I don't know. I don't know what there is now. But it doesn't seem like it would take too long to find that out. Go to ChatGPT and ask. That would be like the obvious first thing. Okay, if you're not on ChatGPT, you need to go get on ChatGPT. Just go to chatgpt.com, okay? And then just sign up for free. Like, you just give an email address and a password. Like, you just make up an account. And then there you go. You can start using it. And then ask it this question. Say, I live in this city or in this region. I am, a student. My major is this, or what I studied is this. And I'm wondering, is there a website or is there facilities nearby in my hometown, that do that? Right? You know what? Just to slightly break the monotony a little, let's try that. Let's try that together, okay? Okay. I am in. You know what? Why don't you tell me the name of your city? If you're comfortable sharing that, let me know. And I'll type it in here and we'll do this together, okay? Just to see what it says, just for the people that have never used ChatGPT. I know there's a few of you out there. Let's do this together, okay? So let me know it was real. Amaze says, hi, Bill. I meant LinkedIn activities like comments and likes that may appear political to some. Yeah. Don't look. I mean, listen, each to their own. Okay. Like, who am I to give advice on how you live your life or anything? But look, for me, I'm of the opinion personally that going in the public domain and, shooting your mouth off about politics or a lot of different topics is basically a waste of time. It's worse than a waste of time. Not only do you waste the time and effort that you're spending on this, but it probably doesn't result in you feeling good in the end, because you'll get all kinds of people saying, you're an idiot, all this kind of stuff. I mean, is that really worth doing? You convince absolutely no one to change their outlook on any of this stuff, right? It's like, I would include religion in that, just personally, like anything like that, politics, religion, it's very personal. People have got their minds made up, and just shouting at them and telling them wrong or trying to talk sense to them, in my experience, it just doesn't work. So it's just an absolute waste of time. Serious people don't really do that. That's just my personal opinion. Like, I don't want people to rake me over the coals for that, but just whatever floats your boat, but, that's not what LinkedIn is for, in my opinion. Like, if you're using it as a tool to open up doors for you, the last thing you want to be doing is talking about politics, because usually all that results in is like half your audience or a certain proportion of your audience, just if they see that, they are now hostile to you, or they're not favorable to you, whereas they would have been before, Same with religion, going on there and spouting out your religious beliefs. You know what I mean? If that's all just out there, what that does is it kind of just closes doors, People that might have been open to working with you, now they see that and they go, that conflicts with what I believe, and I take offense to that, and now they don't want to work with you. So I mean, in my opinion, that's kind of the big effect that sort of stuff does. So the more you could stay away from that kind of thing on a platform like LinkedIn, in my personal opinion, it would be better for you. If nothing else, it'll save your time, maybe save your frustration and gray hairs, and it still enables you to work with more people rather than closing doors, even doors you're not even aware of. They see something and they go, no dice. I'm not reaching out to that person, Hashim says, I was asked in an interview you left the last job to pursue new opportunities as your goals and aspirations don't align with former. What does it mean you will leave us if you didn't see the opportunity? Sorry, Hashim, got a problem with the grammar. Don't understand what you're saying. If you could break this paragraph up that you wrote into sentences, small sentences, then it would probably be easier for me to understand, and I'd be happy to respond to you. Okay, it was real. It says Boston. Okay, Boston. Let's do this. Is there a website you would recommend? I don't suppose I can cut and paste, can I? Just for students getting hired. Copy. Let's just see if I can do this. Okay, so I live in Boston. Okay, let's just start with this. It's searching the web, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see. Okay, so I just sort of copied your text there. It says, if you're a student or recent graduate in Boston seeking opportunities beyond LinkedIn, several platforms cater specifically student-focused job platform, Handshake, Way Up. Okay, so it gives you a bunch of things here. Boston-based opportunities. Now, does it have the links? Okay. Please give me the links to all options. Okay, so here you go. So you could follow these, I'll just say open in a new tab. Oh, whoops, I don't want to do that. Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay, that's not letting me click on that in a new tab for some reason. So I'm not sure how this works, but I can just click on it. Oh, I see. It's because of this. So you could open it up in a secure window or, whatever you want to do. It opened the first one. So anyway, so yeah, first step of any kind of thing you're wondering is get on ChatGPT and just see what it has to say, right? Okay, so it's got a lot of stuff here for you to check out. Now, maybe one or two of these might hopefully work for you. Okay, Hashim says, they asked me the names of the company that you are interviewing. If you are, do they need the names also? Okay, they asked me the names of the company that you were interviewing. So in other words, so you're going for a job. You get to the job interview, okay? They ask you, the recruiter asks you, what other companies are you talking to? And I want their names. That's what you're saying? Okay, well, the answer to that is you say to them, I have a personal policy of not disclosing such information. That information is personal. It's also confidential. And so, unfortunately, I can't really be a help to you on that. I'm sure you understand. There are privacy issues. There's confidentiality issues. I'm sure you understand, right? Any or all of that, or you could just shorten that. No, sorry, I don't give that out. And then usually then people ask me, well, what if they ask me again, right? And I say, here's what you do, okay? Everything I said, whatever you said the first time, you say it again, just with a smile on your face, right? Well, I'm sorry, as I explained, unfortunately, I can't give you that information because I have a personal policy of not disclosing such things. There's confidentiality issues. There's, privacy issues. I'm sure you understand, right? Okay. They're not entitled to that. What you do with somebody else is none of their business, right? And they're not asking for the specifics to help you. They're asking for it to undermine you. Either they're trying to get you for less and less money to make an offer for as low as possible, or they're trying to sabotage you, which has been known. If you give your current employer all the particulars about like this other job offer you've received, right? It's a well-known thing, and it does happen where employers will sabotage that offer for you. They'll call up the company and they'll say something like, "Oh, you're the recruiter that's in charge of hiring for this position. I understand that you've been speaking with one of my employees, Mr. John Doe. Listen, I can't in good conscience stay quiet and not tell you this, okay? We've had a lot of problems with that employee. They've been drinking on the job. They're a terrible employee. We're about to fire them. And I understand that you've extended them an offer. And it would be irresponsible of me and negligent to just let you hire them and not inform you about the extent to which this employee has caused us pain and harm. And, you really want to reconsider hiring them. You know what I mean? Things like this, they can do stuff like that. It just takes one phone call and poof, your job offer is gone, right? And that's good for your employer. Now you're not leaving. And now you're not trying to get a raise or anything like that. Whatever the advantage was of that second job offer, that's a real thing. So don't give them that kind of information. I don't care what they say, why they need it. Just you have a policy of not disclosing it. There are privacy and confidentiality issues. Identity theft is real. I'm sure you understand. You guys take protections against this kind of thing. So do I. So must we all. And there we go. Hashim says, will you leave us if you didn't see yourself growing at this company? That was the questions they asked me in the interview. I left to pursue new venture, but they counter-questioned me. Well, I don't fully understand the situation, but that's like an employer saying, listen, okay, I understand you're here about this job. And then they ask you a few job interview questions, and then they say, listen, if we were to, treat you like crap and deny you a promotion and change all your duties on you and then short you on the compensation, would you have an issue with that? It's like that's their equivalent of asking that, if I'm understanding this correctly. And that's a red flag. Now, to try and give them the benefit of the doubt, if they said, if what they're trying to say is they're trying to say, look, I understand that, you're looking for a position that will grow over time. Maybe you'll get promoted. Maybe it'll open up more opportunities. You'll eventually move up the ladder. I understand that. That's a perfectly normal thing to want, okay? But I'm informing you that the way we sit now it really appears like this job is going to remain stagnant for a number of years. There's not going to be, as far as we can tell, any immediate openings higher up in this particular work group or this division because we're just starting out. And, so if that were to transpire, would you have an issue with that? Would that be grounds for you leaving? Are you impatient to sort of climb the ladder and, progress your career? Would that be an issue for you? Something like that. Like maybe I'm trying to be nice to them and say maybe that was the spirit in which they meant it. But still, it's kind of a weird thing to say. You know what I mean? It really seems like they're offering you a very crappy job, and it's really bordering on unreasonable to like ask these questions. I mean, it's perfectly legal, and I'm sure, I don't know if you're in India or someplace like that. I mean, that's more typical, as I understand it, over there. But it's still pushing it. Nick says you can control-click as a shortcut to open new tabs. We all learned something new here today. Yeah, I know that, but that's not what I was doing. I was trying to. It was blocking my opening up a new tab because the link was not verified. That was from within ChatGPT. Hashim says, yeah, it was a hiring manager. Listen. Here's what I would say, Hashim, okay? Now, there are some things that they can ask you that definitely cross the line, okay? The thing about the other jobs, that crosses the line, okay? Because if you were to get another offer from somewhere, they could sabotage you, okay? But the strategy that I'd recommend for most people is that if you're going to go down to an interview, go down with the intention to get the job, okay? What that means is like just focus on getting to the next stage of the hiring process. So if the way it works is they do a screening interview and then they do a full interview and then they give you an offer, let's say that's their process, okay? If you're at the screening interview, do everything in your power to get the full job interview. And then if you get called to the full job interview, go down there and do everything in your power just to get the offer, okay? So what should you say in the interview? What should you do? This goal is what informs you what you should do. You need to do what you need to do to get the offer. Get to the next stage, okay? Okay, so what you may want to do is like the rest of these kind of weird questions, just roll with it. Just give them what they want, assuming they're not crossing a line, like they're asking for confidential information or things that legally they're not entitled to, right? And, what's the worst that could happen? They give you the job. Then you can see, okay, this is what this job entails. You start, you say, I accept, you start. Now, if it's really bad, you could always keep looking. You could always quit and keep looking or whatever. But, just try and get it in your hand. At least it's something. It's better than nothing. You know what I mean? So even though it's not ideal, even though there's some red flags, you might want to just, in the absence of any other option, just pursue it. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Jennifer says, hello from Maryland. If you were looking for a job, what are the exact steps you would do daily? Unanswerable, Jennifer, because I don't know what situation you're in. I don't know what industry you're in. I don't know what level you're in. I don't know what restrictions you're in. Are you available to do shift work? Are you able to travel around the world and work on an oil rig? It's like, no. And that's not something I can answer in a couple of minutes. There's a lot there. I've already kind of explained that earlier. I said, there are multiple methods of getting a job. You wouldn't just confine yourself to one, okay? So what that means is that you would still look at the posted job market, okay? Then you would do several things in the hidden job market. I listed several earlier. Things like the direct outreach, the simplest possible method of direct outreach, where you would send just a message, to hiring managers. And if you want to know specifically what that looks like, there's a video linked in the description box under this live stream. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. That's where you can see me on my desktop clicking and doing things. Okay, there's some stuff there. I would also go the route of informational interviews. I would do that with more promising targets, like employers where you really want to work. It'd be more of like a dream job, okay? Certainly for those and the more promising things where you can learn a lot, I would use informational interviews. They're more labor intensive, but they're more effective when done right. And it's worth it if there's like something really promising at the other end for you. Okay. I would also do things like applying in person. Like obviously not for everything, but I would do that. I would also include that. That can be very powerful depending on the situation. So there's different vectors to get at jobs. And I would use like, I would do like, I'd say 4 or 5 of them, as part of your job search campaign. Guido says, hope it's not too off topic, but how would you approach communicating at work that a solution or plan is simply not feasible without becoming a scapegoat/naysayer? I put a lot of that stuff in that course. That course is all about advanced communication skills. They're the stuff that I had to learn. I had to tack on to my technical skills when I started climbing the ladder. And a big part of that is, first of all, it's called Write Like a Professional, but it's really about what to communicate, right? Delivering bad news is always a challenge. If you deliver good news, it's really not that hard to screw up delivering good news, to agreeing with somebody or announcing something that everybody finds favorable. That's not tough. What's tough is being able to communicate something negative, right? So there are many different ways of doing it depending on the situation. Like, for example, if it's a meeting where, there are, let's say there's a boss who makes the decision and you're a subordinate and you're trying to communicate to the boss, like, look, this thing that you want us all to do, it's not going to work, right? That's what you want to communicate. The problem is if you say it like that, what happens? Those of you that have done this before, what happens every time? Well, they don't listen. You don't convince them. And then they label you a troublemaker. You're a dissenter. You're a malcontent. You don't have confidence that we can pull this off, right? You become the enemy, right? That's the problem. So how do you not paint a target on your back, but you still communicate? This is not going to work, right? Well, it's not the most original thing in the world, but you basically ask, you say like, listen, if we were to do this and we were to run into this problem, how would we manage to keep it on track then? It's like like I was head of safety for a company for a couple of years or a few years. And it's like, you're the one that's always putting the brakes on things, right? People want to rush ahead with all these projects, and you're the one that's always having to, pull them back, right? No, not so fast. You guys know the rules. We can't just go ahead and do that. We have to do this first and that first, right? So you're always the bad guy. You're always putting the kibosh on their plans, right? So you have to phrase it. You have to say like, look, okay, if we do that and we don't follow the rules, we don't do it by the book, and this happens, somebody falls into the hole, what do we say? How do we justify it? And that's when the boss kind of goes, well, it's quite simple. You kind of, no, we can't say that. You got a point, right? So like that's the reaction you hope for, right? Where like they realize it because you're sort of challenging them. Like, how would you get out of that situation? And then they realize when trying to explain, it's like, we might not be able to get out of that. So then they agree with you without you having to have to tell them they're wrong. Telling people they're wrong doesn't work. What happens when you tell someone they're wrong? Well, they hate you. That's the first thing. And secondly, they don't consider what you say because they hate you, right? Any more than you would consider someone that, you don't like. Do you really think like, maybe they have a point. I am an idiot. It's like, no, right? So that's what I would say. I mean, there's other ways too, but you pick and choose depending on the situation. Get that course for the full meal deal. There's several things you got to tack on if you want to climb the ladder. One of them is people management skills. One of them is financial skills. Another one is this, which is the sort of advanced communication skills. So all the stuff I learned in sort of going from where I started, which was a frontline supervisor, all the way up to CEO, I put in that course, all the communication stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that kind of thing. Link in the description. So that was Guido. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense, Guido. Hashim says they rejected me, to be honest. It's like, yeah, they were asking you some really stupid questions there, Hashim. It sounded like it was not a good thing. It's like, it sounded like it was just, they knew it was a bad position or something, and they're trying to make all these justifications for it. That's usually not what you do. If you're a recruiter, to a degree, you're trying to sell the job. You're trying to say, like, this is a job you would want. Look how good it is. Look at all the things that it offers you, right? And they're doing the opposite of that. They're saying, like, well, if this job turned out to really suck, would you have a problem with it? If we turned into the worst bosses you've ever had, would you have a problem with that? It's like, it's just very suspicious. So I wouldn't worry too much, Hashim. It really seems like you dodged a bullet. Okay, there are 41 people here, and we've reached the end of the chat. So speak now or forever hold your peace. I want to thank, there's some people that have been asking some really intelligent questions today. So thank you for that. It's nice to get some pretty intelligent questions in there too. Actually, I mean, we haven't really had any stupid questions today. They've all been pretty good. So right on. In these moments where I'm sort of have to fill air while we're waiting for the next question, let's go back to the topic of today. It says, is it you or the system why you're not getting hired? Well, listen, the thing about job search is that I'll say this, okay? This is my opinion. It's my opinion based on my experience. Now, it's still only my experience, but it's my experience working in my career, and then also going back to school and teaching, 20-something students in university and business school about getting jobs and stuff. And they were looking for anything from summer jobs to like career type jobs. And what amazes me is like how people don't inform young people about how this process really works. I would have thought they would have done this in school, but no, they don't. They never mention things like the hidden job market, and instead it really focuses on, the kind of certain elements of the posted job market where you just trust everyone, you take them at their word, you wait in line, you stay in your lane, you wait to be called. It's that kind of approach, It's almost like teaching your children, that when you go out into the real world, like all advertising, you just accept it. All these claims, like this product is the most amazing thing you've ever seen. It's like, here's our commercial. We're going to show these people like living in tropical island, they're really happy. And that's how happy you're going to be if you buy this, box of Pop-Tarts or whatever, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's like if you accepted everything at face value, you'd be very disappointed. And other people would take you for a ride. And that's kind of what's going on. You know what I mean? Now, if you're getting a job in government, if you're coming out of school and getting a job in, say, government, then, okay, it's a bit more familiar with what you're expecting. If you're trying to get a job in like a charity, which is not really a job, it's a volunteer position, usually, those type of positions, then, okay, you can just sort of believe them and go on that. And there isn't any more to this. It's all above board. But certainly for the private sector, it doesn't work like that. Like there's all kinds of stuff going on behind the scenes. And it's not this big nefarious thing that some people think it is. It's simply to see people's true colors, Some people are just proactive and they're very persuasive and they can make things happen. And others aren't. Like the opportunities are available to everyone, but a lot of people don't avail themselves of the opportunities because they don't know they're there. But other people do, you know? And I think it's just a real tragedy that, you know, more young people just aren't told about this stuff. Now, if you get your first career job and you open your eyes, you can see this stuff usually going on all around you, right? Who gets, when the boss retires or the boss leaves, who gets their place? Either someone at your level moves into their role, and then you wonder, why did they move in? Why wasn't it me? You know, maybe that's the beginning of that process of learning, right? Find out what happened there. You know, maybe they hired somebody external to the company. It's like, did you see a job posting? Did you see a job posting? No, I didn't see a job posting. I didn't know we were getting a new boss. You know, it wasn't posted publicly. It wasn't on the company website. I would have seen it if it was. You know, it's like, okay, maybe that's the point where learning starts happening. You realize, okay, this person got hired and it wasn't posted, you know? So you know what I mean? Like, you can start opening your eyes and seeing this stuff, right? You know, you don't need to look far to see how this works, right? It just, I don't know. I keep going on about it. I'm just amazed. I feel that, like, schools in general are doing an absolutely terrible job, a criminally bad job. And it's an injustice to young people by not even, like, mentioning that this is a thing. This is how it works, you know? You know, it's not all about following a procedure and staying in your lane and waiting to be called. It's about seizing opportunities. And I don't know. If I was cynical, I would say that kind of violates how they view the world or something. I'm not sure. You know, in a general sense, possibly, but I'm not sure. Anyway. Guido says, makes sense. Basically, just show the potential roadblocks and negative scenarios without saying it won't work straight away. Yeah, the problem is, like you say, that won't work. That's really what's going on there is you're expressing an opinion, right? You don't know. The boss doesn't know. Nobody knows because it hasn't happened yet. So you're saying my opinion is that this is not going to work, right? So how do you interpret that? The boss believes it does work and the boss wants to go ahead with it. And you're the subordinate and you're saying, I don't think it's going to work. Now, how do you feel when you want to go and do something, no matter what it is, something you've done 1,000 times before, and you've got some other person standing off to the side, maybe it's a friend or family member saying, that's never going to work, when you feel it will? How do you feel about that person? Do you like them? No, you think like, shut up. You know, it's like, it is so going to work. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Are you saying I'm wrong? Are you calling me like, you know, are you calling me an idiot? I don't know what I'm doing? Because that's the implication. Right? I said, I think it's going to work. You're saying, despite that, you think it's not going to. So you must not have confidence in my abilities. That's the implication, right? So there's all that kind of stuff going on. That's why it's very kind of sensitive. You know? I mean, this is like a thing that's out there. It's kind of reasonably well known. I think it's called Ask, Don't Tell, or that's not the don't ask, don't tell thing. This is like, you know, instead of telling them it's not going to work, you say, well, what would we do? How would it work if this happened? Then where would we be? You know? And then they kind of realize it, thinking through it. Yeah, you're right. We might have a problem there, you know? Because now it's coming from within them, not externally from you. You're not the like one that has to act like everyone's conscience, you know? See, don't you just love that stuff? That's, if you study organizational theory, that's where they study this stuff. It's a fascinating topic. It's one of the areas of business. It's a little bit of psychology, a little bit of sociology, a little bit of political science, and it studies how people behave in organizations. And what it does is it explains all the weird crap that you see at work. Like if you think back, if you're between jobs right now, if you think back to when you were working in an organization and, you know, you see all kinds of weird things going on. People like, you know, an employee that is technically a subordinate to the boss but yet they have the power over the boss instead of the other way around. The boss can't fire them. The boss is afraid to piss them off. Even though they're the subordinate, they still dictate to the boss what happens. Things like that. That's an example. You know? Things that executives, especially in big corporations where they got to play office politics all the time, how can I have control over something and get my way, but yet I can't be blamed if it goes wrong? Things like that. There's a lot of ways of doing that, and people invoke them every day, So like that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, if you know organizational theory, you like go to work and then you see all this weird stuff and it all makes perfect sense to you because you understand exactly what's going on and why. And now that you know all the principles at play that are governing everything, that's how you can navigate it, not fall into the traps and make things go work well for you. It's part. Yes, it's part of an MBA. You can learn it in my course if you get that. Yeah. Emmy says, in this day and age, what is the approximate timeline to get a job offer? Well, that varies. There's no answer to that. I don't know what the average is across the board. I'm not like an HR person. Even if you could find a big average for like every job, every industry, every country, what use would that be? Some people get jobs instantly. Other people are out of work for years before they find something. It really depends on how, effective you are in your job search campaign, right? So number one, use multiple methods. Learn about the other methods. If all you're doing is applying to posted jobs, learn about the other methods. Okay? There's a lot of other things you can do there. Then you multiply your chance of success. The other thing is like there's basic principles like fish where the fish are. If no one is hiring in this area, stop looking there. Or it's like much more fiercely competitive there. Stop looking there and look in a place where they are hiring. I know that seems self-evident, but like you'd be amazed how people like don't really follow these kind of basic rules, And it's not like, I'm an average person, so the average time is 1 year, so I should be hired in a year. You can't think like that. Just the global average or whatever may not apply to you. It might be a lot quicker for you, You know what I mean? It really depends. Now, all you can do, that's effective, is you can try and learn, job search. Because being, like I said earlier, being qualified for a job is not the same thing as being able to get a job, right? Getting a job and being qualified for a job are two different things. Sometimes people who are really qualified for jobs can't get hired for years. Other times, people that really are not that qualified to do anything, they get hired instantly, right? Why is that? It's because they know how to get the job, right? All the stuff that we're talking about here, right? How you apply, how you get applications that get interviews, how you do an interview that gets an offer, how you handle an offer or negotiate an offer where you win, things like this, right? It's like they know all that stuff. They just don't have that many skills, at least not that are elevated, that elevates them above the crowd. And I'm sure you've seen examples of that. There's a lot of people out there that get jobs successfully, but they're really not that good. I had a boss, it was like a boss of a boss, like 30 years ago or something, that like the guy was all talk and he got this like position, like he was like 3 levels above me and I was a supervisor. He was all talk. He didn't do it. Like he was absolutely useless at his job, but he wowed all the managers that hired him, It's like, yeah, there's people like that out there. They're great at, giving people what they need. And he wasn't a psychopath or anything. He was just a very extrovert, very touchy-feely people person kind, When it comes down to getting on with some actual work, he did a terrible job. But like when it came to building relationships and having everyone like him, at least superficially, he was a master at that. Wouldn't it be great if you could have a bit of both? You got some real skills, but you also can make a very strong case in a job interview. It's not all about qualifications. You put yourself forward as the person they would want to work with. Wouldn't that be great? It's really not that hard. Emmy says, I've had so many interviews and no offers. It has me questioning myself and my value. Emmy, that's a perfectly normal thing, okay, to question yourself under those circumstances, okay? Every normal person would, okay? Now, the first part of that, okay, you've had a lot of interviews and a lot of offers, and no offers, a lot of interviews and no offers. A certain amount of that is expected up to a point, okay? Now, what you may want to do, okay, because what this suggests is that your ability to write a good application and send in a good application, that seems to be fine. You're getting interviews, but there could potentially be a problem with you passing the interviews, okay? So, apart from all the self-evident stuff, learn how to do job interviews, recognize that they're about how likable you are. That's really what it's all about. Don't be fooled by the fact that they ask you about technical things, your qualifications and stuff. It's not about your qualifications. As far as they're concerned, you're qualified or you wouldn't even be at the interview, okay? The only question now is, are you the person they want to work with, right? Okay, now learn how to pass that test, okay? What could be, like I said this earlier this stream, but in case you weren't here for it, I'll say it again. Like career coach, career coach is what I've had a career coach say to me recently was like, a lot of people just do one session and all you need is one session. You do a mock interview with the career coach. And then afterwards, the career coach says, listen, here's some honest feedback. And if they're like a professional recruiter or something, then, hopefully it won't be completely out to lunch. They might give you some pointers and they say, look, this is good, and this is good, but don't say this. And when you talk, don't do this. And when you talk, also try and do more of this because you're not doing that. And it's coming across like this, So like, just to make sure there aren't any like things like that are holding you back, might be an idea. If you want to do it on the cheap, you could just ask friends and family to do mock interviews with you. And then that has intrinsic value. But then as a fringe benefit, you could say like, look, how do you think I'm doing? Is there something I should maybe tweak that would improve my chances? Like, what's your honest opinion? And if you trust them, I don't know if you trust your friends and family to give you a good opinion about it, but they may be able to help, right? So you could try that as a first step. It costs nothing to do. You can do it very quickly. If not, maybe one session, a short session with a career coach, just to sort of help you with that, just to see if they can identify any obvious things that need to change, like in their opinion, that might yield some results, and other than that, just keep on keeping on, just lather, rinse, repeat, do multiple methods and then do this. And that's covering all your bases. So, I think you'd stand a pretty damn good chance if you did those things. Does that make sense, Emmy? Hopefully that makes sense. Mighty Mojo says, thanks, and big hug goes out to Canada. Thanks, Bill. You're welcome, Mighty Mojo. Right back at you. Guido says, politicians are a great example of a job where they know how to get there, but don't know what to do once they got there. Yeah, okay, well, just for the record, I'm not a politician. I don't really care about that stuff, but what I will say is that a lot of people say that kind of thing about managers, It's like, it's all talk and it's all, this and that. And, they really don't know what they're doing. It's just coincidental because that's what everyone says right up until the point where they're in the chair, they're in that role. And then suddenly it doesn't seem so damn easy. You know what I mean? It's so easy to be a Monday morning quarterback and just criticize, and it's a lot harder to actually be there without the benefit of hindsight bias and see what you actually have to work with and what the actual constraints are that you're under, and still try and make something work. And sometimes you realize, like, wow, this is just an unwinnable, impossible situation. This is a no-win situation, you know. Yeah, I get the same feeling when I've seen documentaries about the Vietnam War, because, you know, it's a totally good idea to talk about this. You know, it's like when you look at the political situation there, it's like, I don't know how the Americans could have won. It was like a no-win situation. It was just like, you know, the opposing side could do all these things, and for various political reasons, the Americans couldn't. So it was like totally, you know, asymmetrical kind of thing. It was completely, well, you wouldn't use the term unfair, but the point was it was completely different rules, you know, for both sides. And it was impossible. It was a no-win situation. I feel sorry for the guy that was in charge of it. That is a General Westmoreland or whatever. Anyway, but it's kind of like that. A lot of people say that about managers. It's like, you know, yeah, it seems so easy until you see what we really have to work with, and then it's not so easy all of a sudden, you know? Anyway, but yes, there are some total idiot managers out there. I'll be the first to admit that. So there you go. Okay, we've been doing this for like nearly 2 hours. I got some great questions. Hopefully I managed to give somebody some kind of help in some degree. I mean, the problem with these things, I got like, you know, I feel like I only have a couple of minutes to answer. It's hard to really give a lot of useful stuff in a couple of minutes, but hopefully that makes sense. If you want to go deeper with me, like you've seen on your screen for the last 2 hours, I got these courses. This is the big one that a lot of people here might be interested in. That's basically all my advice for like how to get a job. And the real value as I see it is I show you how to do the networking thing in the hidden job market. And if you're an introvert, this is tailored to you. Okay, you do as much as you possibly can over social networking. And a lot of times that's where it ends. But you can go further, and you can do meetings and things like this, like things like informational interviews. But the beauty of informational interviews is that, like I said earlier, is that it doesn't work like a job interview. In a job interview, it feels very unwelcoming. You feel like, in a way, you're treated like cattle. They don't care about you. You're a dime a dozen, you know, that kind of thing. Informational interviews, the idea is that you get invited in. The person says, hey, I would love to talk to you. Come on down, you know, come meet me at my office, or we could go grab a coffee, you know, this kind of thing, right? It's a completely different vibe to a job interview. It's usually much more pleasant. I've done tons of these in my time. I'm a big believer in them. They've opened up a lot of opportunities for me, you know, and they can for you too. So that's the value of that course. I like walk you through that kind of stuff, how to generate that for you. You know, now if you're in IT, someone was asking about IT at the very beginning of this. If you're in IT, you're trying to get a job in IT, you're a technical type person, you're not like a extroverted social butterfly type person, that's fine. But like an IT manager at a company who could hire you saying, come on down, you know, let's get together. You know, come and meet me right here would be a good time. You know, are you free then? Yeah, come on down right here. You know, I'll be at my office, or we could grab a coffee, like I just said. You know, and you're talking to an IT person about IT. You know, it's really not that challenging. You know what I mean? It's not that intimidating, even if you are an introvert. So that's the big value of that course, I suspect, for a lot of people. If you want to learn business, you want to get promoted at your job, you want to start making better decisions that lead to the company making more money and looking at you as like someone who can do management and all that kind of stuff, check that out. Or you just want to be an entrepreneur and do a side hustle and have your own company, work for yourself. That'll lay the foundation for doing that if that's what you want to do. And this one here, that's the communications course. That's advanced communication. That's the stuff that I had to learn to become like a CEO and executive and all that. It's the stuff you learn at that level. So if you want to be considered a contender for roles like that, that's something that might be of use to you. So check those out. There's links in the description box underneath this live stream. Thanks to everybody who participated. There's 35 people here. You guys are awesome. I wish you nothing but the best. I am here Monday, Wednesday, Friday, just answering questions. So if you have questions, you can come back on Wednesday, and I'll try and help you out there too if I possibly can. Other than that, absolute best of luck. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.